Everyone thought the ocean had been defeated. That was the lie Karen sold, and the lie everyone believed, until the sea came back to collect its debt. This isn't just a story about power, money, or an HOA gone wild. It's about arrogance meeting nature, and why the ending was inevitable. Karen Whitmore didn't see herself as a villain. She saw herself as a visionary. As president of the Seabreeze HOA, she controlled every decision that mattered in the quiet coastal community. Paint colors, fence heights, parking rules, nothing escaped her approval. Homeowners feared her emails more than storms. But Karen wanted more than order. She wanted legacy. Behind closed meetings and carefully worded community improvement notices, Karen pushed an ambitious plan: transform a protected stretch of shoreline into a private luxury resort. Officially, it would increase property values. Unofficially, it would make her rich, using HOA funds, legal pressure, and selective rule enforcement. She forced residents to comply. Those who resisted faced fines, lawsuits, and endless violations until they gave up. The warnings came early. Environmental consultants said the land was unstable. Longtime locals talked about king tides, shifting sand, and storms that swallowed roads decades ago. Karen dismissed them all. She believed permits and concrete could overpower history. When regulators hesitated, HOA lawyers applied pressure. When neighbors protested, security removed them. Progress, Karen said, always upsets people. Construction began under clear skies and fake smiles. Massive seawalls rose like trophies. Palm trees were planted where mangroves once slowed waves. Marketing banners promised oceanfront paradise, while residents watched their beach disappear behind fences. Karen stood for photos, hard hat on, arms crossed, confident and untouchable. But the sea was patient. Tides crept higher each month, unnoticed in glossy brochures. Drainage failed during minor storms. Cracks appeared in fresh concrete. Engineers asked for emergency meetings. Karen ignored them, calling it panic and negativity. The resort had to open on schedule. Delays meant weakness. Then came the storm warning no one could spin. The water didn't roar in. It rose calmly, relentlessly, reclaiming what had never been hers to give away. That night, cameras captured Karen standing alone on the seawall, heels sinking into wet sand, staring at the horizon. She told herself control was permanent, that authority could outlast tides. Yet somewhere beneath the waves, pressure built, currents aligned, and memories of old shorelines resurfaced. The ocean does not argue, it waits. And when it moves without permission, without notices, without appeals. Toward balance, it remembers better than any human ever could. By morning, the first alarms would sound, and the story Karen controlled would begin slipping beyond her reach forever, as neighbors watched silently from dark windows along the flooded coast. Morning revealed what denial had hidden. The resort parking lot sat underwater, a shallow reflective lake where luxury cars were meant to shine. Waves lapped gently against the seawall, spilling over as if testing its strength. Karen called it temporary flooding in an emergency HOA email, assuring everyone the structure was over-engineered. She ordered staff to pump water out and demanded silence from residents who started filming. Engineers arrived with grim faces. Their reports were blunt. The wall was redirecting water inward, not away. The reclaimed land had no natural defense left. Every high tide now pressed harder, faster. They recommended immediate evacuation and partial dismantling. Karen refused. Evacuation would signal failure. Dismantling would admit she was wrong. Instead, she blamed contractors and threatened lawsuits. Homeowners gathered on balconies and rooftops, watching workers battle water with hoses and sandbags. Some remembered the mangroves that once absorbed storms. Others remembered being fined for protesting their removal. Now, cracks widened across walkways like spreading veins. Elevators failed. Power flickered. Still, Karen insisted the grand opening would happen. The king tide arrived 3 days early. No sirens, no dramatic crash, just water rising steadily through storm drains, toilets, and basement vents. The ocean didn't attack, it reclaimed. Hallways filled ankle-deep, then knee-deep. Furniture floated. Glass doors shattered inward under quiet pressure. Guests fled barefoot, dragging luggage through salt water. Karen stood in the lobby, phone pressed to her ear, shouting at insurers who refused coverage. "This is sabotage," she said. "An unforeseeable event." Outside, the seawall began to lean. Each wave removed a little more sand from beneath it. Engineers watched helplessly as physics erased paperwork. Residents evacuated on boats borrowed from fishermen. Karen once fined for unsightly equipment. Irony traveled fast on social media. Videos spread of luxury suites flooding, chandeliers reflecting rippling water, and HOA signs half submerged. Comment sections filled with one word: karma. By nightfall, emergency services cordoned off the area. Officials cited illegal alterations to protected coastline. Permits Karen boasted about were suddenly under review. HOA funds were frozen. Lawsuits stacked faster than tides. Karen, soaked and shaking, watched from a patrol boat as the seawall cracked with a dull, final sound. When it collapsed, the ocean didn't surge forward. It sighed inward, filling the space naturally, smoothly, as if the resort had never existed. Foundations vanished beneath churning water. The land settled back into its old shape. What took millions to build unraveled in hours. Karen realized then that authority works only where rules exist. The sea follows none. It remembers older boundaries, older paths, and it always returns to them eventually. As rescue lights faded, silence replaced her confidence, and the truth settled heavier than water. Power borrowed from nature is always temporary, and repayment comes without mercy. The aftermath moved slower than the flood, but it cut deeper. News helicopters circled the ruins at sunrise, broadcasting images Karen couldn't escape. Twisted railings, broken pools, and waves rolling calmly where reception desks once stood. Reporters called it a preventable disaster. Officials called it gross negligence. Homeowners called lawyers. Karen was suspended from the HOA within 48 hours. The same bylaws she once weaponized were used to remove her authority in a single emergency vote. Emails that once inspired fear now went unanswered. Her phone buzzed only with legal notices, refund demands, and one message from a bank asking about collateral that no longer existed. Investigations uncovered everything. HOA funds rerouted through shell contractors. Environmental reports buried or rewritten. Residents testified about intimidation, fines, and threats. The fishermen spoke about mangroves destroyed. Engineers admitted they'd been pressured to approve unsafe designs. Every decision traced back to Karen's signature. The community fractured under the weight of loss. Some homeowners faced ruined properties and skyrocketing insurance premiums. Others were forced to sell at massive losses. Longtime residents blamed themselves for staying silent. New buyers felt deceived. Anger replaced shock, and Karen became the center of it all. Court proceedings dragged on for months. Karen sat at polished tables in borrowed suits, listening as experts explained tide's erosion and why the coastline had always belonged to the sea. The judge didn't raise his voice when he ruled. He didn't need to. The fines were devastating. Personal assets were seized. Civil suits followed. Criminal charges loomed. Yet the ocean kept working quietly. Without seawalls, currents smoothed the land. Sandbars returned. Grasses took root. Birds nested where cabanas once stood. Locals noticed fish coming back. Nature didn't celebrate. It simply restored balance. Former HOA members organized cleanup efforts, not to rebuild, but to heal. They planted mangroves again, this time guided by scientists and elders who remembered the old shoreline. Regulations tightened. Signs went up explaining why nothing permanent would ever be built there again. Karen watched it all from a distance, her name now shorthand for arrogance. Friends disappeared. Invitations stopped. Legacy turned into cautionary tale. She once believed control meant permanence. Now she understood permanence belonged only to forces larger than her. On the anniversary of the collapse, the tide rose high again. It reached the same invisible line, then stopped. No damage, no drama, just proof. The sea had reclaimed what was its own and held it peacefully. The community gathered quietly on the restored shore, listening to waves that sounded less like a threat and more like a reminder. Power can bend people, but it cannot bend nature forever. And when the sea decides to return, it doesn't ask who's in charge. Years later, the story still circulates online, often reduced to a headline or a viral clip, but those who lived through it remember the quieter lessons. The coastline never became a resort again. Instead, it became a boundary, clearly marked, carefully respected. Children grew up hearing why the mangroves mattered, why the sand shifted, why some places were meant to stay wild. The HOA still existed, but it was unrecognizable. Meetings were open. Decisions required consensus. Environmental scientists sat beside homeowners. Power was shared cautiously, like fire. Understood now as something useful but dangerous if mishandled. Karen's name was rarely spoken aloud, but her shadow lingered in every careful vote. Karen herself faded from public view. Court records closed, debts settled as much as possible, and what couldn't be paid followed her like a ghost. She moved inland, far from the sound of waves. Those who knew her later said she avoided the ocean entirely, not out of fear but out of understanding. She had learned something most never do. Limits exist, and discovering them can cost everything. Meanwhile, the reclaimed shoreline thrived. Mangroves grew tall, their roots knitting the land together. Fish returned in schools thick enough to darken the water. Birds nested without disturbance. During storms, waves broke gently against natural barriers, dispersing energy instead of destroying homes. The community watched, humbled, as nature did effortlessly what concrete never could. Tourists still came, but not for luxury. They came for guided walks, for history lessons, for stories of how human certainty collapsed under quiet tides. Locals told the tale without anger now, only honesty. We forgot where we were, they'd say. The sea reminded us. On clear evenings, residents gathered along the shore. No fences, no signs claiming ownership, just people and water sharing space. The ocean reflected sunsets in colors no resort brochure could ever capture. Beauty, it turned out, didn't need control. The final irony wasn't Karen's downfall or the lost money. It was that the land became more valuable after being left alone. Property stabilized. Insurance returned. Peace followed. The HOA that once tried to dominate the coast now protected it. Not out of regulation, but respect. The sea never sought revenge. It didn't punish. It corrected. It reclaimed memory, shape, and balance. And the people who listened learned to live smaller, wiser, and safer. Because power borrowed without humility always expires. And nature, patient and precise, always collects what's owed, then moves on, unchanged, waiting for the next reminder to be needed. If you loved watching Karen versus the Sea, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and tell us in the comments what you would have done if you were in her shoes. Stay tuned for more jaw-dropping HOA stories.